Welcome to this higher video lesson on evaluating the impact of a development approach on the performance development process. Basically, what was good or bad about the approach you planned and took part in. This lesson can be used for all four MESC factors. Let's focus on the command word first. We'll recap the word evaluate. In the dictionary, evaluate means to form an idea of the amount, number or value of something, basically to assess. We're trying to create an idea of the value and impact of the tools we use within the cycle of improvement or analysis, depending on what you describe it as. So how do we answer evaluate in higher PE? We break it down into these three things: identify, value and judgment. So what does this mean for today's learning intention? Which is, by the end of this lesson, I will be able to evaluate a development approach. Well, to use evaluate for this, we would have to identify a part of the approach that was good or bad. We then have to provide a definite value to this, i.e. what's increased, decreased, or maintained, etc. And then finally, we judge what the effect of this increase, decrease or maintenance was. So we'll identify, we'll provide value to this, a definite value to this, and then we'll judge what the actual impact of this was. And in this case, on performance development. Here's an example of evaluating a development approach, and a bit of an answer structure as well. So to identify, you could say, I had to do my training outside thanks to COVID. You would say this was good or bad. The value of this would then be, this decreased my motivation as it was cold and wet. The judgment of that, and this is where you begin to have a bit more of an answer structure there, always try and answer judgment with meaning, I did not improve as much as I was capable of. A key point before we move on is to consider evaluate versus analyse in terms of command words. Even though we know that we use IVJ for evaluate, as we've just discussed, and I, identify, implications and impact for analyse, it can seem very similar at times. The key difference to keep in mind is analyse answers should be probable. They should be written in a pre or current tense. Evaluate answers are definite, they're past tense. See the next slide. Here's just a small example. Analyse is during something or before something. So for example, if you're watching commentary on a football match, that's someone analysing the match as it goes on, it's currently happening. Whereas evaluating is more like match of the day on a Sunday or Saturday night. It's evaluating the outcome of what's happened. So we're thinking about what actually happened in our training programme. We're not guessing what might happen. Evaluating is saying this definitely happened. So it's probable versus definite. So in terms of identifying the good or bad parts of our development approach, what are these parts? Well, the good thing is that they can be mapped. You can consider, did we use music? What was the area like that we worked in? Was it indoor, outdoor? What kind of surface did you work on? Did you use a partner? What was the pace of your program like? Did you use any equipment? What was the difficulty like? Were these things good or were they bad? And how did they influence your performance development? Key tip here is the parts can also be mapped for using an analyse question for a development approach. Just remember, the tense has to have changed. When you're analysing, these things would be probable. If you're evaluating, these things would be definite. They definitely happen. Before we start, copy this table down. So pause this video here and copy this table down. Make sure you've got quite a lot of room between the rows, and don't cut it off at any more point because you might have lots of examples that you're going to put in there. Pause the video. So, we're going to be mapping our development program. What was good or bad about it? Let's consider music first off. If you used it, was it good or bad for your performance development? Let's have a listen to this video first off.
Music can have a dramatic influence on our focus on how we move.
Music can have a dramatic influence on our focus, on how we move, and obviously our overall mood. But the question is, should we use it for running? And if so, how? Well, I'm going to be looking at the pros and the cons of running with music today, as well as speaking to an expert to do my best to answer that question.
By putting my hands up and saying that I am fairly neutral.
I have to start by putting my hands up and saying that I am fairly neutral on this one, as personally I don't actually run with music for various reasons which I'll describe later on. But I thought I'd start with the pros, basically cover what I'm missing out on.
Yes, music has been proven to improve
performance. Yes, music has been proven to improve performance, which is a big claim, I know, and it does depend on the type of music. But we'll look into that more when we speak to an expert later on. But I'm sure if you've ever done a live event or a race and there's been live music, a band or a DJ playing, then you'll have experienced that lift. Whether you realised it at the time or not, I bet you got a benefit from it. It can help cancel out distractions and get you in the zone, eliminating any outside thoughts as you lose yourself in your favourite tracks. And I know a lot of you guys don't like to hear the sound of your breathing when you're working hard, or maybe your feet pounding on the ground. Well, it's a great way of eliminating this. Music's also a brilliant way to get you in the mood before you go for a run. I personally listen to upbeat tunes just to help get me motivated, as often getting out of the house is the hardest part of the run altogether. And now for our final pro point on the list. What if you don't like structure, or you don't want to think when you're out running? You just want to go and sort of lose yourself and not look at your watch or follow a set programme? Then why not allow music to help dictate your running and just break things up a little bit? For example, you could use the structure of a song, so you could run steady on the verse and you could run really hard on the chorus of each song if your song suits that. Alternatively, you could simply just do one song fairly steady, one song at a higher tempo. And if you want to take it a step further, you could even structure a playlist that's going to work so you don't have to think about it, you just follow that and your tempo
So although this is for running, these pros could also be used for any factor that you're developing or any training program that you could be thinking about. But of course, for some of you, it might be negative. Let's have a look at these. So if you listen to music during your performance development program, was this good or was it bad? It's time to identify this. So these are the kind of questions you could be asking. If you listen to music, was it upbeat? Was this good or bad? If you listen to music, was it loud or was it not loud enough? Was this good or bad? If you listen to music, how did you do it? Was this good or bad? In the first column of your table, put this in the identify column for music. You can choose one or you can choose more than one, it's up to you. But base it on the real thing that happened. So, now that you've identified the good or bad things about whether you listen to music or not while training, let's move on to area. Now we're just working on the identify part of your evaluate answer. Remember, it's broken up into 3 parts, but let's just look at the first column of our table, which is identify. So, what area did you train in? Was it good or bad for your performance development? Let's identify what was good or bad about it. So we could consider these questions. Ask yourself this: were you outside? Did the weather affect you? Was this good or bad? Were you indoors? How was the room temperature? Was this good or bad? How was the surface you were training on? Was this good or bad? Did you have enough space in the area you worked in? Was this good or bad? Pause the video here, reflect on these questions and choose the ones that are relevant to you in terms of identifying what was good or bad about the area in your training program, filling in column 1 of your table. Now we're going to consider whether if you use a partner, was it good or bad? But let's listen to this first before we move on to how it affected you.
have no problem training by myself, going to a movie by myself, staying in a hotel, obviously by myself, flying by myself. But it is tough. There's days where, when you're doing legs and you're piling on the plates on the leg press machine, it's just you doing it. But then I can tell myself I'm going to do it. As a professional, they're able to smile when they're doing it. I think once you get that right frame of mind in that zone, nothing else matters. I work my butt off, and I enjoy lifting. I enjoy the way I look. I enjoy the feels while I'm lifting. I enjoy the way I look after I'm lifting. When I'm posing in the mirror and stuff, I like to know that I got something out of this workout. Having a training partner could be helpful, but if they're pulling out the weight up for you, I don't think it's helpful at all. I see it all the time, and I just don't believe that being a bodybuilder means that you have to overexert yourself to where you have to have someone lift all of it yourself. Because if I lift it all myself, I'm getting maximum benefit, right? But if I'm having you help me, I'm probably getting 75. But guess what? You're still now at a number where if I was at 100%, so ultimately I just rather do it by myself. I know I can hold myself accountable. If I don't show up to the gym, I lose. But if I ask you to show up to the gym and your wife calls and says, hey Phil, sorry I can't make it, then now I'm bummed. Oh man, I'm going to show up today. Well, I don't care. I'll tell them this is the time and the place. And if you don't show up, fine.
So for some athletes, it's not a benefit to work with a partner, as you've just heard. But for some of you, you may have worked with a partner. Was this good or bad? It's time to identify this. So the things that you can consider are, was your partner a friend or someone you didn't know well? Was this good or bad? Was your partner someone of similar ability or fitness or not? Was this good or bad? Did your partner provide you with feedback? Was this good or bad? Now remember, you can also consider other things if it's relevant for you. You don't just have to stick to these reflective questions to fill in your identify column. Pause the video here and fill in column 1 about your partner. Now let's move on to the pace of your program. Was it suitable for your performance development? It's time to identify this now. The only question you really have to answer for this one is, was your training program set at the right pace? Did you give yourself enough time or too little time? Was this good or bad? A simple one, put in column 1. Now, did you use any equipment in your performance development? Time to identify what was good or bad about it. So the 2 questions you can consider here are, did you have to set up lots of equipment to take part in your development approach? Did you have to put it away after that? Was this good or bad? Did you have sport-specific equipment involved in your training? Was this good or bad? Now attempt to fill in column 1 in the identify section for equipment. All we're looking for you to say, remember, is, for example, I had to set up lots of equipment prior to my training. This was bad. That's all you have to say. Pause the video here, check that you've done that correctly for the other ones. And also remember, Only do the things that's relevant and real to you, but what actually happened for yourself. Finally, let's identify what was good or bad about the difficulty of your training program. Time to identify if it was good or bad. The two reflective questions to help you identify this is, what was the level of difficulty like? Was this good or bad? Did your program get progressively more challenging? For example, did you use progressive overload, or was it a gradual build-up program? Was this good or bad? Pause the video here, complete column 1 for the last part of the mapped parts, which is difficulty. Now we're going to try and attempt to fill in the middle column of our table. We're going to try and apply the value of these good or bad parts that you've identified. You're going to pause the video here and you're going to consider what are the kind of things that increase, decrease or maintain as a result of the parts that you've identified as good or bad. Before you attempt that, I've taken you back to this slide just to give you a little view of what it could look like. So if you identified that you had to do your training outside thanks to COVID, which was bad, I haven't added that in there, that should be added in, you need to say which was bad or wasn't helpful. The value of that would then be, this decreased my motivation as it was cold and wet. That's all I'm looking for you to do. So I'm going to take you back to the other slide to look at the kinds of things that can increase, decrease or be maintained as a result of these good or bad things that you've identified. So take the time that you need just now to identify what of these things increased, decreased and maintained, and fill in the second column in the middle column of your table to move to the next stage of evaluating. We're still not even at the part where you get marked, but we're building it up. Pause the video here. Now it's time to apply the judgment to the values. Fill in the right column of our table, the third column of our table. You can use these examples to fill in that and match up to your identification of your values if they're relevant. So take time to read through these and see which ones are correct for you. Take as much time as you like, fill in the table. Now I've provided you with some model-ish answers that you can use to check and change your own work. Now this doesn't mean that what you've written isn't correct, so you can ask your teacher whether your own work is correct or not, but you can use these as examples. If you think that they're more likely to get you a mark, then check and change your work. Remember, you can't really in the exam say that something was bad and something was good, and that something was bad and something was good. So be careful of how you're writing. Yes, parts of your training program can be good and some can be bad, but you can't use your judgment to say that, meaning I didn't improve at all, and then in the next mark talk about how this part helped you to improve. So just be careful with that. Pause the slide after this for a couple of minutes to check about your answers for music. Do the same for area. Check and change your work, or check with your teacher whether the answer that you've given would be given a mark or not. Do the same for partner. Pause the video. Do the same for pace. Pause the video. And again for equipment. Pause the video. And finally for difficulty. Take time to look at this one. There's lots of answers here that you might have given yourself. Thanks for watching everyone. Hopefully that you'll have achieved the learning intention of, by the end of this lesson, I'll be able to evaluate a development approach using maths and using I, V and J. Watch it again at home, it's going to be on YouTube. Any feedback would be appreciated. Thanks very much.